The story opens in the early morning as Miharu, the older brother, is telling a fairy tale to his younger twin siblings. He begins his tale with a little flair, speaking of a white castle nestled deep within the mountains, where a princess who never smiles resides. Miharu says that many have come to visit, hoping to make the princess smile, but no one has succeeded. Before he can continue, Miharu glances over at his siblings and realizes they aren't even paying attention. They're too busy watching TV. He sighs, thinking to himself about how his little brother and sister are making a mess again, and quickly turns off the television. Immediately, Rio, his younger brother, throws a mini tantrum, shouting that Nai switched off the TV. Rio continues his protest, saying that he still wants to watch. He still wants to watch it, as he flails his arms like it's the end of the world. Miharu, in his typical older brother voice, reminds him that if they had watched all of them, they'd be late for nursery school. He adds with a mix of frustration and authority that they need to hurry up and get ready. Both Rio and Riri look at Miharu and pout, clearly unhappy with the abrupt end to their TV time. Their mother suddenly appears, probably sensing the chaos brewing, and hurriedly apologizes to Miharu. She tells him that she needs to go and will leave the two of them in his care. Miharu replies quickly, telling her to have a safe trip. After getting the twins dressed and ready for the day, Miharu announces to them that they need to go too. As they walk to nursery school, Miharu reflects on how his life changed in the spring of his first year of high school. He remembers that since his parents were busy, he began looking after his younger siblings. Although it requires much more effort to look after them alone, there have been some unexpected perks in doing it. When he drops the kids off, they wave goodbye enthusiastically, making him smile at the surprising little rewards that come with taking care of them. The scene shifts to Miharu's high school during lunch break. A classmate approaches Miharu and asks if he is going for today's mixer. Miharu replies that he is not. Not one to give up easily, the friend pleads with Miharu, saying that they are just short one guy. The friend adds that Miharu shouldn't always be taking care of the kids, and suggests that sometimes he needs to take a breather. Miharu looks at him, stays silent for a moment, and then asks if he can bring his siblings. The friend reacts with disbelief, asking if Miharu is kidding. The friend then adds that Miharu shouldn't always be taking care of the kids, and asks if it wouldn't be alright for him to show a little interest in romance in his high school life. Miharu answers, saying that it is an unnecessary burden, and asks if it isn't fine as it is now. His friend stares at him, a bit dumbfounded, before shifting the conversation to another topic and asking who Miharu likes in their class. As if on cue, Miharu's gaze lands on Yuki Mizudori, a fellow student with an aura of mystery. Another student approaches Mizudori and asks if she has some time after school. Mizudori replies that she is sorry, but she has something going on. The rejected student walks away, muttering to himself that it wasn't going to work out with Mizudori anyway. Miharu's friend turns back to him, commenting on how popular Yuki Mizudori is, like some fairy tale character. He goes on to say that with a well-featured face like a princess, a cool expression that never shows a smile, and a mysterious life without accepting anyone's invites, it is partly because of that expression that she is called the Ice Princess. Miharu thinks to himself that he hasn't talked to her before, which isn't surprising given how different their lives are. His friend mentions that he has tried inviting her 3 times, but she shot him down each time. The friend shifts back to Miharu's situation and puts a hand on Miharu's shoulder, telling him that he understands how tough it is to take care of his brother and sister, but advises Miharu to make sure he doesn't end his youth with just taking care of kids. Miharu ponders for a moment, admitting inwardly that it's not entirely true he has no interest in romance. He thinks that considering he is also a high school boy, there's no way that's the case. However, there are always other things on his mind. Later, the scene shifts to Miharu at home, once again trying to entertain his younger siblings by telling them the fairy tale he'd started earlier. Miharu continues his story, saying that in a white castle deep in the forest, there lived a princess who never smiles. Although many people have visited every day, Riri interrupts, asking Naini what kind of person the princess is. For some reason, Mizudori pops into Miharu's mind, and he wonders why on earth he's thinking about her at this moment. Before he can sort out his thoughts, Rio delivers a swift kick to Miharu's leg and declares it a snow kick. Suddenly, a superhero play bursts into action. With Rio dramatically blocking Miharu's path, Rio shouts that he won't let Miharu pass. Miharu plays along, accusing the little white braver of being the bad guy. Riri interrupts again, demanding that Miharu continue reading the story. He tries to pick up where he left off, saying that there lives a princess who never, but Rio and Riri aren't satisfied. They shout in unison that if Miharu is beaten, he should fall down. Miharu quickly agrees, but Rio and Riri continue to yell for him to do it properly. Miharu is too exhausted to keep up with their endless energy. He mentally notes that he doesn't really have time for all this theatrics, so he decides to order some food to keep the little troublemakers happy. When the food arrives, Rio and Riri cheer that it's from Yumur Eats, their childish take on popular delivery service. After eating, they all take baths, and Miharu tucks them into bed. Finally, his mother returns home late, quietly opening the door and whispering that she is back. The next day after school, Miharu is packing his bag when he finds one of Rio's toys in it, a snow-white rod. He holds it up and playfully pretends to transform into a hero, saying, "Shine on the snowfield, Snow White." Just kidding. Then, without warning, Mizudori appears behind him, catching him mid-hero pose. Startled, Miharu quickly tries to play it off, thinking to himself that at least the Ice Princess could laugh at him. To his utter surprise, Mizudori reaches out and grabs his hand. Miharu panics inwardly as he realizes how close she is, and even more shockingly, that she knows his name. Mizudori tells him that he is good at it, leaving Miharu a bit flustered. She then asks him if he likes white braver, as if she isn't aware that she's just turned his world upside down with that one question. Miharu, feeling a bit flustered, blurts out that his younger sibling likes it. Mizudori raises an eyebrow and questions if that is so. In an attempt to demonstrate, Miharu strikes a pose from the White Braver show. Mizudori follows suit, mimicking his stance and asking if it is like this. As she mirrors the pose, Miharu's mind reels in confusion. He silently wonders what on earth this situation is. Before leaving the school, Mizudori announces that she has something to attend to and politely excuses herself, adding a thank you that leaves Miharu scratching his head, thinking to himself how mysterious she is. The scene shifts, and Miharu is now walking home with Rio and Riri. Riri pipes up, calling her brother Ni, and tells him that Rio is going to visit Reiken's place today. Miharu turns to Rio and asks if Reiken is his friend and if he has promised him. Rio confirms that he does so yesterday. Miharu grumbles that Rio should have told him. Rio then mentions that Reiken's Oni-chan, or older sister, isn't very good at superhero play, and Miharu, with a hint of pride, replies that it is the same as them, though he is good at it. Riri adds some background information, saying that Reiken's parents aren't around today. His dad has gone to the office for work, and his mom is in the hospital, or at least that is what Reiken has said. Miharu murmurs to himself that it sounds terrible, then thinks about how similar it is to their own situation. Riri optimistically says that Reiken doesn't feel lonely because of his Oni-chan and remarks that it is the same as them. The three of them arrive near Reiken's house, and Rio exclaims that this is the area Reiken has mentioned. Miharu casually asks what Reiken's last name is. Rio answers that it is Mizudori, and as they look around, it becomes clear they are standing right outside Mizudori's house. They see Mizudori holding her little brother, and Miharu's eyebrows chewed up in surprise. The scene shifts again, now showing the kids diving into superhero play. One child enthusiastically declares that they will play as Snow White, while Rio will be Sugar White, and Riri will be Lily White. Miharu, watching them frolic, silently wonders in disbelief what this situation is. Part 2. He glances at Mizudori, his thoughts drifting to how amazing the whole scenario is. Considering the events that lead up to this moment, he can't quite believe he is now inside Mizudori's house. Mizudori turns to Miharu and says that she has seen Ryo-san and Ruri-san at the nursery before, but didn't realize they are his siblings, Oba-kun. Miharu admits that he also doesn't know her brother goes to the same nursery school as them. Mizudori continues, noting that the two are twins, right? Miharu confirms with a yep. She then comments on how adorable they are, which makes Miharu internally panic as he thinks to himself that the princess is melting. Trying to recover, he asks her if she likes kids. Mizudori replies calmly, "Is that so?" Suddenly, Riri rushes over and pleads with her Oni-chan to read her a storybook. Mizudori readily agrees, saying, "Of course." As she begins reading, Rio comes bounding back, yelling a dramatic sugar knee kick before playfully kicking Mizudori. Miharu quickly shouts in alarm, asking Rio what he is doing. He then notices Mizudori lying on the ground, dramatically declaring that she has been beaten. Reiken, from the sidelines, shouts at his sister to just go away already, and with that, the kids dive back into their superhero play. Miharu, fully embracing the chaos, theatrically declares that White Braver will not get away with this and that he will definitely get his revenge one day. He continues shouting and flailing around, allowing the kids to defeat him in their game. Seeing them have so much fun, Mizudori expresses her amazement, saying it is the first time she has seen her brother enjoy superhero play so much. Miharu catches his breath, relieved, and responds that it is great to hear. The scene shifts to the kitchen, where Mizudori opens up about her struggles. She admits that no matter what she does, she is bad at using intonations and showing expressions. Miharu relates to her, saying he has also struggled to play with Ryo in a way that satisfies him. Trying to encourage her, he adds that she will get there. He used to be ridiculed all the time in the past. Mizudori then wonders aloud if the problem lies with her face, prompting Miharu to look at her in surprise. She continues to explain that she has heard many times before that her expression is never changing, like a doll, and as cold as ice. Miharu, with a reassuring tone, suggests that everyone is probably praising her. Mizudori, however, shifts her gaze to her brother and says softly that it is okay. Even if she isn't able to smile, as long as she can make that child smile, she is satisfied. Miharu watches her quietly, a bit taken aback by the heartfelt moment unfolding before him. The scene shifts to Miharu as he announces that it is time to go home. Mizudori chimes in, noting that it is already time for dinner, right? Ryo, ever the curious one, immediately asks what is for dinner today. Miharu glances at his phone, mulling over the possibilities, and suggests they might just order something. Mizudori then asks what they usually do for meals. With a shrug, Miharu, still browsing through the food delivery app, explains that when their parents aren't around, they mostly rely on deliveries or grab something from the convenience store. Not missing a beat, Mizudori quickly ties her hair up into a ponytail and springs into action, starting to cook dinner herself. She prepares a meal for everyone, leaving them all in awe. Miharu, feeling a bit guilty, apologizes to Mizudori for making her go to the trouble of offering them dinner. Mizudori, in a matter-of-fact tone, says she wouldn't say food from convenience stores and ready-made meals is bad, but the thought of all that salt and oil makes her feel like it is best to avoid them every day. Miharu, taking her point seriously, promises he will be more careful. As he takes a spoonful of rice, he can't help but think to himself that it has been a long time since he has eaten something warm. It feels great in a simple but profound way. As the children eat their rice, Riri ends up with some stuck on her face, prompting Mizudori to gently wipe her face clean with a napkin. Miharu takes this as a teaching moment, reminding Riri to thank her for wiping her face. Without hesitation, Mizudori then turns to Miharu and wipes his face too, adding that he should thank her as well. Miharu, caught off guard, stammers a quick thank you. The scene shifts to the two of them washing dishes, where Mizudori turns to Miharu and apologizes for sounding arrogant earlier when she talked about the meals. Miharu waves it off, telling her it is fine because she is just looking out for him too. Mizudori, with a sigh, confesses that sometimes she feels the need to act like a replacement for her mom, who is hospitalized. She laments that no matter what, she is always just that kid's sister, even though she knows there are some things she can't fully take on. Miharu winces at her words, admitting that she has definitely hit a sore spot. Mizudori quickly apologizes again, but Miharu interrupts, saying that for them, who are still just children, this is probably the best they can do. He adds that because they are closer in age to the kids compared to their parents, they don't just protect them, they also have moments when they can all smile together. Mizudori listens intently, and Miharu suddenly raises his hand and declares, "Transform." He then chuckles, explaining that he means there might be times when she will have to do things even if it feels embarrassing, especially if she is to become a wife someday. Mizudori looks at him, her face showing a mix of concern and uncertainty, as she wonders aloud if she can really do that too. Miharu reassures her, saying that when she is with the kids, her expression softens. He points out that although she might be a little more difficult to read than others, he doesn't think she is incapable of changing. Handing her a plate, Miharu adds that's why she shouldn't say it is fine if she can't smile. He tells her that it would be good if they could both smile together. Mizudori looks into Miharu's eyes, and he quickly grows flustered. Mizudori then quietly says, "Is that so?" Soon, they set some jellies in front of the kids, who immediately become excited, but in mere seconds, chaos erupts as they begin fighting over the melon jelly. Mizudori, with a resigned tone, apologizes for giving them bits and pieces. Miharu, trying to ease the situation, tells her it is fine and then turns to the children, playfully warning that if they keep fighting, he will take all the jellies for himself. Rio shoots back angrily, calling him a jelly thief, to which Miharu retorts, "What did you say?" Rio and Riri then launch themselves at Miharu, who is now playfully wrestling with the two of them. Mizudori and Riken look on in surprise as Mizudori intervenes, reminding the children that only good kids will get dessert. She urges everyone to get along and hands out the dessert one by one, making the kids giddy with excitement. Later, Miharu lies sprawled on the carpet, admitting that as expected, it is tiring dealing with all three of them at once. He wonders aloud if he has managed to do well. Mizudori, standing beside him, echoes his thoughts but then urges him to take a look. The children are clearly happy, their laughter filling the room. Mizudori says she is glad, a rare softness in her voice. Miharu glances at her, noticing that for once she is smiling. Seeing his sister smile, Riken is shocked and shouts in disbelief, asking what is wrong. Mizudori tries to calm him down, confused herself, and asks what has happened. Riken exclaims that his Winnie-chan has smiled, leaving Mizudori a little taken aback as she asks, "Am I smiling?" As Miharu observes the scene, a story he has once heard comes to mind. There is a princess in a white castle who never smiles, and many people visit the castle to make her smile, including a prince from an unknown country and his small people. Miharu thinks to himself that he is just an attendant of the small people, not a prince by any means. As Miharu and his siblings prepare to leave, he thanks Mizudori, who responds that she should thank him too. Just as they are about to walk out, Mizudori hurries over to Miharu and asks if he will come again. Miharu looks at her, surprised. She explains that if she has smiled today, it is thanks to him. She adds that she wants to smile even more and wants to do so in front of the people important to her. That's why she begins. But Miharu is still processing her words when Riri tugs at him and asks what kind of person the princess is. Mizudori's voice breaks through his thoughts as she repeats, "Would you make me smile?" Miharu silently contemplates, telling himself that he is merely an attendant of the small people and definitely not a prince. Yet if the princess wishes for it, no matter how many times, they'll visit the castle. The next day, Mizudori is approached by a student who nervously hands her a love letter, clearly hoping for something more than just a casual chat. But Mizudori, with her usual calmness, replies that she has something going on after school. The student's hopes deflate instantly, and someone nearby whispers that he was about to confess. Another voice chimes in, saying it was just like the Ice Princess to stay so unfazed. As Mizudori leaves, some other students watch her, sharing comments about how pretty she looks, wondering what she usually does after school. One of them jokes maybe she's going to some fancy ball. She is nicknamed Princess after all. Hearing this, Miharu thinks to himself, yeah, sure, if by ball you mean picking up her little brother from nursery. He can't help but remember visiting her house just the day before, and how she also takes care of her younger sibling, just like him. Later, another student enthusiastically invites Mizudori to eat together, but she excuses herself, claiming she needs to go to the bathroom. As the other student says they'll start eating without her, Miharu's thoughts drift back to the night before when he had asked Mizudori what could make her smile. Her response wasn't about specific things, rather she just asked him to keep playing together with her like they did that day. Then Rio had chimed in, asking if he could come back tomorrow. Miharu had quickly told him not to just ask things like that out of the blue, but Mizudori had said she'd be waiting. Now Miharu wonders what exactly their relationship is. Are they friends, classmates, or something else? While washing his hands at the sink, he mulls over the idea that maybe Mizudori is just doing all this for his younger siblings, but still he feels happy that they now have more places to play. As he returns to class, he sees Mizudori approaching and hears the usual whispers of admiration. Some girls are even jealous of her style, but to Miharu it feels like she belongs in a completely different world at school. As Mizudori gets closer, she suddenly tells him she needs to ask him something. Miharu is a bit flustered, thinking she's standing too close, and he can practically feel the eyes of their classmates burning holes into him. She then asks if he knows what kind of food Rio and Ruri like. Surprised, he responds with a simple answer, curry, which seems to satisfy her as she thanks him and walks away. Miharu watches her go, thinking, yep, it's clear she's only interested in his younger siblings, not him. Overhearing some other students whispering, he catches snippets like, weren't they standing really close? And who is that guy anyway? He can't be her boyfriend, right? Feeling the pressure, Miharu blurts out, I was just saved by Mizudori-san. She told me the teacher was looking for me. The whispers turn into dismissive comments like, "Of course not. They're not a good match as expected." Despite all the doubts, Miharu wonders if it's really okay for him to keep visiting Mizudori's house. Fast forward, and he finds himself at her place once again. Mizudori announces that today they'll be doing whatever Ruri wishes, causing Ruri to burst out in excitement with a loud yay. Mizudori explains that they'll be putting on a play, so everyone should draw lots to decide their roles. As the papers are unfolded, Miharu sees that he and Mizudori are cast as older and younger siblings. This makes him think, so maybe siblings. The group dives into the play, with Riken stepping up as the father, Ryo taking on the role of the dog, Ruri proudly playing the mother, and Miharu assigned the part of the older sibling. Mizudori, in a twist that seems a little out of character given her usual composed self, takes on the role of the younger sibling. Miharu finds himself struck by the oddness of the situation. Wait, Mizudori is playing his little sister now. This is just way too strange. Things get even more bizarre when Mizudori starts addressing him as Babu. Miharu, thoroughly perplexed, thinks to himself that she's pretending to be a baby now. Mizudori explains her reasoning, saying that if she says fewer things, there's less chance for her to mess up. Miharu, trying to be understanding, responds in his thoughts that it makes sense. Just then, Ruri approaches with a water bottle, insisting that Miharu feed some milk to his sister. Miharu tries to argue that this should really be the mother's responsibility, not his. But with Ruri already busy feeding Reikun, he realizes he's not getting out of it and decides to just get the scene over with. Raising his voice, he announces that it's time for her meal. Mizudori, never one to break character, puts her head gently on Miharu's lap and repeats the word Babu softly. Miharu's thoughts start racing as he wonders what on earth she's doing. But then he tries to calm himself, reasoning that she's just playing her role as a baby. As he tries to stay in character, he finds himself distracted by the feeling of her silky hair and the fresh scent of her shampoo. This is too much, he thinks to himself. This whole situation is impossible. After the feeding, Mizudori continues the scene, saying in her baby role, "Thanks for the food, Babu." Then, returning to her usual tone, she adds that normally, a baby would need to burp after a meal to avoid spitting everything up. Miharu acknowledges this, thinking that he's probably heard that somewhere before. Mizudori goes on to demonstrate with her hands how the burping should be done, explaining that if the air taken in with the milk isn't let out, the baby could end up vomiting it all out. Miharu, impressed by her knowledge, admits in his thoughts that she knows quite a bit. Mizudori shares that her experience comes from taking care of Reikun, as it happened to him once. Miharu finds himself a bit stunned at this revelation, realizing that Mizudori has a side to her that isn't just about being the ice princess at school. Mizudori, with a hint of curiosity in her voice, asks if things were different for Ryo and the others. As they continue cooking dinner together, Miharu, while helping out, explains that their mother remarried last year, which is when Ryo and Ruri came into the picture. That's why he doesn't know much about them from when they were babies. Mizudori listens and responds simply, as if putting pieces together. Miharu continues, mentioning that his stepfather is a business partner from his mother's workplace, and since both of them work, there was some talk about getting a babysitter. Mizudori interjects, pointing out that he chose to babysit them himself. Miharu admits that's right, adding that he was raised by a single parent, so he spent a fair share of time alone. Miharu goes on, sharing that he now respects his mother for earning money on her own, although back then he couldn't help but think there was something wrong with her. That's why for Ryo and Ruri, he wants to make sure they don't feel lonely or like no one's there for them. As he says this, Mizudori's expression shifts to surprise, and Miharu quickly apologizes, saying she doesn't need to trouble herself with his personal stories, and maybe he shouldn't have brought it up. But Mizudori disagrees, saying she's glad to know about it, and then, in a thoughtful tone, she adds that the more she learns about him, the more she thinks he's an amazing person. When she sees him with his siblings, it feels like they're a real family, and she tells him he's a good older brother, Oba-kun. Miharu, not wanting to take all the credit, counters by saying that if she's going to put it like that, then Mizudori is a good older sibling too. But Mizudori disagrees, almost reflexively, saying that's not true at all. Miharu insists that it is. They sit down to eat dinner, and after the meal, Miharu thanks her for the food. But then he thinks to himself, hang on, it wasn't even curry, even though she'd asked about it. Still, he's happy because croquettes happen to be his favorite. Later on, as the scene shifts, Miharu hands Mizudori an envelope, telling her it's the food expense for the last 2 days. She shakes her head, saying she can't accept it since he was also helping out with Reikun. Miharu shrugs, saying that goes for him too, but then adds that his parents insisted on doing it properly. He tells her that if she doesn't accept it, it would make it difficult for him to keep coming back. He also points out that even though they're just high school students, he shouldn't make decisions about involving their siblings without being responsible. Then, with a bit of hesitation, he asks again if it's really okay for him to be there, saying that while he's doing it for his siblings, it might not look good if people see a classmate visiting her house so frequently. He worries it could trouble her if they're found out. Mizudori seems puzzled and asks why that would be a problem. In his mind, Miharu thinks if rumors start about her being seen with someone who doesn't exactly match her status, it could hurt her reputation. But he can't just tell her that, so instead he says that while she called him amazing earlier, she's actually the amazing one. Mizudori seems a bit lost at that and admits she doesn't really understand. However, she quickly adds that she doesn't see him as just a normal classmate. Miharu is visibly surprised, and Mizudori continues, saying to her, he's more than that. She then wonders out loud what exactly they are to each other, but adds that at the very least she doesn't make things for people she doesn't care about. Miharu is taken aback by this, and Mizudori follows up with a knowing smile, asking if he likes croquettes. Miharu is startled, exclaiming that he only told her his siblings' favorite foods. Mizudori reveals that she asked Reikun, who had checked with Ryo and Ruri about what Miharu likes. She explains that from now on, she'll keep surprising the people she cares about, then adds with a playful tone that tomorrow's curry is still a secret. Miharu feels a wave of emotions wash over him as he takes a deep breath. This is bad, he thinks. What's with her going out of her way for him like that? It's as if the small worry that was nagging at him has completely vanished, and all that's left is a sense of happiness. Just then, Ruri comes up to Miharu and hands him a piece of paper, saying, "Nini, I'll give this to you." Miharu accepts it, thinking, what could this be? Maybe it's something from when they were playing house earlier. He thanks her, and then Reikun gives Mizudori a paper as well. Miharu thinks to himself that despite everything, maybe he and Mizudori aren't close enough to be called friends. They're just classmates and fellow guardians who take care of their siblings. As he opens the paper, it turns out that he and Mizudori have been assigned the roles of mother and father respectively. Ruri chimes in cheerfully, saying it's like they're making food together as if they were newlyweds. Miharu, feeling a little annoyed, snaps back that babies shouldn't be teasing high schoolers. Meanwhile, Mizudori glances over at Miharu and wonders to herself, what exactly is he to me? As Miharu heads to school, he's mentally reviewing the rules he decided to set for himself regarding his visits to Mizudori's household. He thinks to himself that the first rule is to prioritize the younger siblings above all else. Both of them agreed that this was the most important thing. The second rule, he muses, is that if meals are prepared for him, he will pay for the food costs and Mizudori will accept it, hoping this will make things less awkward. Finally, he settles on the third rule, not to talk about the younger siblings at school. Although Mizudori didn't seem to fully get why it mattered, she agreed if it was necessary, considering that Mizudori Yuki is pretty much the school's idol, or more accurately, the school's princess. It's probably best if no one notices their private interactions, he reasons, especially since Mizudori herself mentioned it would be best to keep things low-key for their own peace. Settling down in class, Miharu thinks that despite his planning, they'll still be stuck with this seating arrangement for the entire first semester. It was decided by lottery, so there's no use complaining now. He finds himself sitting next to Mizudori, which doesn't go unnoticed. His friend Mikaj points out his supposed luck in sitting next to the princess, to which Miharu awkwardly replies that it's not really a big deal. Not one to miss an opportunity, Mikaj turns to Mizudori with a friendly grin and says he's looking forward to the semester, suggesting they celebrate with some karaoke after school. Mizudori, with her usual composed demeanor, calmly responds that she already has plans for after school. As if on cue, a girl named Kuwano-san nervously chimes in, excitedly telling Mizudori that she's happy to be sitting near her, or rather that she's admired her for a while. In her fluster, she suddenly blurts out a request for Mizudori to teach her about toner. Mizudori pauses for a moment before replying that she uses her mother's and hasn't paid much attention to the brand, but promises to look into it next time. The teacher enters, announcing the start of class and instructing everyone to take out their textbooks. Miharu, thinking that sitting next to Mizudori won't be a problem since neither of them is the chatty type, starts rummaging through his bag, only to realize with a jolt of frustration that Ryo must have switched out his textbook for a comic book. Gritting his teeth at the thought of his mischievous younger sibling, Miharu raises his hand and tells the teacher that he forgot his textbook. The teacher responds that he should share with his neighbor, leading Miharu to slide his desk a little closer to Mizudori to share her book. And so the class carries on, with Miharu quietly hoping that things will remain as uneventful as possible. As Miharu sat in class, he couldn't help but notice all the other students staring at him. He thought to himself that with less than 2 months until summer break, he was stuck in this seat until then. Just great, exactly what he needed. Then Mizudori leaned over and whispered into his ear, saying that yesterday, while she was watching TV, Miharu practically jumped out of his skin, his hand flying up to cover his ear as he stared at her, wide-eyed and confused, wondering what she was getting at. Quickly, he blurted out that talking about his younger brother was against the rules, hoping that would steer the conversation away from dangerous waters. He wondered internally if sitting next to Mizudori from now on was really going to be okay. After class ended, Miharu's friend Mikage came over and asked if Miharu would be picking up the twins again today. Miharu confirmed with a quick yes, and Mikage turned to a curious-looking Kuwano, explaining that Miharu took care of his younger siblings because his parents were busy. Oh, and by the way, the siblings were twins. Kuwano's eyes widened with awe, and she exclaimed that was amazing, then admitted she had a younger sister but left all the responsibility to her mom. Turning eagerly to Mizudori, Kuwano asked if Mizudori had any siblings. Mizudori fell silent for a moment before saying that she would be leaving now, clearly not interested in the conversation. Kuwano gave an awkward okay, while Miharu mentally sighed, thinking that was definitely not what he meant to happen. Out of nowhere, the class speaker crackled to life, announcing that Aoba Miharu and Mizudori from first year, Class 2, were to report to the staff room immediately. Miharu's mind began to race, and he couldn't help but panic a little, wondering what was going on. Had they somehow found out about him visiting Mizudori's house? But it wasn't like he was doing anything weird, right? Once at the staff room, the teacher asked Mizudori to step in first, assuring Miharu that it would only take a moment and asking him to wait in the hallway. Pacing nervously, Miharu's thoughts spiraled into worst-case scenarios. What could they possibly want? Then the door opened, and Mizudori came out, her expression unreadable. Miharu was called in next. Inside, the teacher started with a barrage of questions about how Miharu was managing with looking after his siblings. Was he struggling with anything? Was he getting enough sleep, or falling behind in his studies? Miharu answered curtly, insisting that he was fine and managing well. The teacher then mentioned that Miharu should aim for full marks on his quizzes, just like Mizudori. Miharu didn't miss a beat, responding that getting top marks was more about natural ability and had nothing to do with his younger siblings. The teacher laughed lightly, saying that he was only joking and that it was good Miharu was handling everything okay. He added that Miharu's parents did come home at night, right? Without missing a beat, the teacher brought up Mizudori's family situation, saying that although he couldn't share the details, Mizudori was also taking care of a younger sibling on her own. Miharu, not wanting to reveal too much, replied vaguely, saying sort of, when the teacher pressed further. The teacher then shared that something Mizudori had said earlier had caught his attention. She had mentioned that her mother's health was improving, but that she wasn't ready to be discharged from the hospital just yet. He asked if Mizudori had anyone else to rely on, and though she confirmed that there was someone, she had refused to say who, only adding that it was someone she trusted very much. The teacher seemed surprised by this, explaining to Miharu that even though he had just become Mizudori's homeroom teacher, it was the first time he had seen her open up in that way. He asked Miharu once more if he knew anything, but Miharu hastily excused himself, saying he had to pick someone up. As he left the staff room, he turned back with a smile and mentioned to the teacher that he, too, had someone he could rely on. The teacher called after him with a grin, saying that was a nice look he had on his face. As Miharu ran down the hallway, his mind raced. Why hadn't he asked Mizudori for her contact information at least? He wondered if she had already picked up the twins. His thoughts drifted back to what she had started to say in class earlier. Was there something wrong with Rhea? He realized then that he really wanted to talk to her and headed toward the nursery school. When he reached the nursery, Miharu spotted Mizudori and rushed up to her. He started to speak, saying that yesterday while she was watching TV with Rie, how much had she really wanted to talk about. Before they could continue, A voice suddenly shouted, "Wait a minute." It was Kuwano, looking rather exasperated as she demanded an explanation for what was going on, leaving Miharu frozen in his tracks, unsure of what to say. Kuwano demanded an explanation from Mizudori and Miharu, just as Rai innocently asked if she was Mizudori's friend. Kuwano glanced at him, wondering if this boy was Mizudori's little brother. Was he some prince from the future? She couldn't help but gush about how both siblings were ridiculously good-looking, calling it a treat for the eyes. The three of them settled on a bench, and Kuwano put two and two together. The younger child must have just gone to the same daycare as twins. Meanwhile, Miharu leaned in and whispered to Mizudori, telling her to keep it a secret that he had been going to her house. She agreed. Miharu then turned to Kuwano and asked if she had a younger sister. Kuwano quickly replied, sharing that her sister was now in 4th grade, even showing off a picture of her sporting makeup. Miharu seemed surprised at the idea of an elementary schooler wearing makeup, but Kuwano explained how she let her sister practice on her. Mizudori chimed in, saying Kuwano was amazing as she wasn't very familiar with makeup herself. Kuwano, ever the enthusiast, suggested they check out cosmetics together after school, but Mizudori politely declined. At that moment, Rie ran up, requesting Mizudori's help to build a castle. Mizudori immediately agreed, leaving Kuwano in shock. She couldn't believe Mizudori was actually headed for the sandbox. She hesitantly asked if Mizudori wasn't worried about getting her uniform dirty, and Mizudori casually confirmed it would get dirty. Kuwano could only watch in disbelief as the so-called princess made herself at home in the sandbox. Miharu commented that Kuwano had once said she admired Mizudori. Kuwano nodded, watching Mizudori play with the kids, and remarked that all girls dream of being a princess, right? Miharu just seemed to wonder if that made Mizudori a princess too. Rie proudly showed off a sandball he had made, calling it a dango. Kuwano fell into her thoughts, reminiscing about her own past as a plain girl who only cared about anime and manga. She had never tried makeup until the entrance exam day, where she found herself admiring Mizudori. She had quickly realized she could never become like Mizudori, so she kept her admiration at a safe distance, afraid to get too close and taint it. Then, Kuwano accidentally bumped Rie, and his sandball fell to the ground, breaking apart. She apologized, offering to fix it, but Rie shrugged and said he'd just make another one. Kuwano muttered to herself, not wanting to tarnish Mizudori. Mizudori suddenly reached out, taking Kuwano's hand, which sent Kuwano into a small panic. Was Mizudori really touching her? She wasn't ready for this level of contact. Mizudori took the broken sandball and smeared it onto her own shirt, causing Kuwano to stammer out an apology. But Mizudori calmly confessed that she wasn't good at smiling and therefore wasn't great at playing with children. She explained that she thought it was fine as long as her younger brother was happy. Someone had told her once that she should try to laugh with him, even though it was difficult for her. She admitted she was trying to learn how. Even if it was hard now, she wanted to do something for him. At the very least, she was willing to get dirty with him. Hearing this, Kuwano found it beautiful and without a second thought, flopped into the sand, shouting, "Mizudori, get me dirty too." The children immediately jumped in to cover Kuwano in sand, while Miharu watched in disbelief. The group soon joined in building a sandcastle, and before long, the masterpiece was complete. Miharu turned to Kuwano, saying that Mizudori was usually quiet and hard to read. People called her the Ice Princess, always praised by those around her, but in reality, she was just an ordinary girl who cared about her younger brother and wanted to spend her time smiling. Kuwano stared at Miharu, then punched him, telling him to shut up. She thought to herself that she had admired Mizudori as a princess in her mind, but now things had changed. Stepping up to Mizudori, Kuwano asked if it was okay not to just admire her. Could they become friends instead? In a burst of excitement, Kuwano declared that she had gotten Mizudori's contact information. She then looked at Miharu and teased that she could ask for his number too, if he insisted, but only because she had no choice. Covered in mud, Miharu remarked that they definitely couldn't go home like this. Mizudori replied casually, and Miharu joked that maybe they shouldn't go home at all. Mizudori said it didn't matter either way, leaving Miharu feeling a little embarrassed. Finally, Mizudori asked Miharu if he would share his number, and he handed it over, still in disbelief. As he pocketed his phone, he couldn't help but think he had just gotten Mizudori's number. In the classroom during break time, Kuwano handed Mizudori a pamphlet for a jewelry exhibition. She explained that the exhibition was happening right now at the shopping mall near the next train station. Kuwana mentioned that there was a design featuring a stone similar to Mizudori's hair accessory, so she thought Mizudori might be interested. Mizudori responded that her accessory was just a gift from her father, and she wasn't particularly into accessories. Kuwana remarked that beautiful stones were indeed attractive, but then thought to herself that it might be difficult to take Rei to such a crowded place. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, Miharu asked Miharu if he was free next Saturday, suggesting they watch a movie together. Miharu replied that his mom had to work that weekend again, and he needed to look after the kids. Miharu commented that Miharu's mother seemed to work a lot, to which Miharu responded that she loved her job. Miharu advised Miharu to take it easy and rest properly before he became exhausted, mentioning that he had seen his sister handling children and knew it could be tiring. Miharu then glanced over at Mizudori. The scene shifted to Mizudori's house, where the kids were playing with toys. Ryo called out, telling Mizudori she had lost again, for the third time that day. Mizudori admitted that it was difficult. The children then suggested watching this week's episode of White Play Bar. Miharu noticed the jewelry exhibition pamphlet nearby and commented that this was what Mizudori had been talking about at school. She confirmed that she had received it from Kuwano. Miharu asked if she planned to go, and Mizudori replied that they hadn't decided yet. Miharu recalled Mikaju's advice about resting and suggested that Mizudori could go to the exhibition with Kuwano on her next day off. Mizudori seemed surprised by the idea, but Miharu quickly offered to take care of Rei if she went. He then asked Rei if he would like to come over on the next day off, to which Rei excitedly agreed. Mizudori, in turn, offered to look after Ryo and the others, suggesting that Miharu could go see the movie with Mikaju. Miharu was taken aback, wondering why things always ended up this way. Mizudori observed that Ewa-kun, Miharu's nickname, seemed tired, unlike her. This comment surprised Miharu, and it led to a playful challenge between the two. They decided on a game called Pure White Hero White Blazer Escape, a crisis avoidance game where the person who dropped the doll would lose, and the loser had to do something the winner requested. As they debated who was more tired, Miharu insisted that he was totally fine and suggested that Mizudori, who did housework every day, might be the one accumulating fatigue. Mizudori disagreed, pointing out that watching over Ryo and Ruri at the same time wasn't easy, so Miharu might actually be more tired. Miharu argued that even grocery shopping must be challenging when adding in portions for all of them. He mentioned that the other day he not only did the dishes, but also cleaned the stove's burnt spots, while Mizudori had cleaning duty for the week. Mizudori reminded him that he had been on class duty the previous day. She explained that it wasn't a matter of not trusting Miharu, but she didn't want him making decisions about Ri on his own. Miharu admitted that he had been hasty in suggesting it, and had no intention of going out to have fun while leaving Ryo and Ruri behind. Mizudori questioned why he had made the suggestion in the first place, and Miharu said it was meant as a form of appreciation for her. He had seen how she handled housework, studied at home, and prepared for preschool, and he wanted to acknowledge her efforts. Mizudori seemed surprised, and Miharu clarified that he hadn't expressed it well before, saying they were both carrying heavy loads after all. He thought that if Mizudori went to the exhibition with Kuwano, it might be easier for them, as they wouldn't have to be so considerate about the kids getting bored if they ended up looking at cosmetics or something. Mizudori suggested that Miharu could come along as well, which would be fine. Just then, the doll they had been playing with fell, and Miharu was startled. Before he could react, the children came running over, with Rai telling them not to fight. Mizudori and Miharu both apologized. Ruri asked if they were going somewhere, and Mizudori suggested that they should all go out together that weekend. Miharu hesitated, but Mizudori showed the doll and explained that even with the kids, there was no need to be overly considerate since Miharu was used to handling them. She said that Miharu would be perfect for the outing, and the children cheered excitedly at the idea. Miharu realized then that he had lost the challenge. Later that night, Miharu's mother informed him about the plans for the shopping mall trip, adding that she had also informed the other parents on her side of the family. Miharu thanked her, and his mother mentioned that she needed to make time to visit and give her greetings. She noted that Miharu didn't have to take Ryo and the others this time since the exhibition would still be on for a while, and she would be there next week. Miharu glanced at his sleeping siblings and said it was okay. He wanted to spend time with them now. He also thought about Mizudori, just as a message from her appeared on his phone. His mother then encouraged him to enjoy the date, since it was a special occasion. Miharu read Mizudori's message, which said that she was looking forward to tomorrow. Annoyed, he responded, insisting that it was not a date. The story picks up with Miharu, all dressed up, heading to the shopping mall with his siblings. Just as they enter, Ryo spots Mizudori and Rie arriving, eagerly calling out that they're here. Mizudori, after arriving, apologizes for making them wait. She looks around and then turns to Miharu, who is in a pair of fake glasses for his disguise. She doesn't recognize him and asks if he's Oba-kun. Miharu, mentally patting himself on the back for his clever disguise, reassures himself that he's wearing this getup so no one they know will recognize him. He brushes off the tension by suggesting they get lunch first. They head to Koka's restaurant, where Miharu slurps down some noodles and tries to shake off the nervousness he feels about being seen with Mizudori in public. Curiously, he asks his siblings how their kid's meal is, and they happily reply that it's good, though not quite as good as Rai-kun's Nini makes. Mizudori blushes at the compliment, while Miharu realizes that the twins genuinely think that this dynamic is perfectly natural. To them, this whole relationship setup is completely normal. Ryo then grabs a toy knife from the kiddie lunch and starts playing with it, but Miharu quickly steps in, telling him to put it away and offering to hold it for him instead. Ryo, however, pouts and stubbornly declares that he wants to go to the bathroom. Miharu apologizes to Mizudori, asking her to wait a moment, and she agrees. On his way, Miharu notices a poster announcing an anime adaptation of The Unsmiling Princess in the White Castle. Meanwhile, as Mizudori waits, a thug approaches her, trying to be charming, calling her "Hey Beautiful," and asking if she's alone. Clearly uncomfortable, Mizudori responds that she's with someone. The thug dismissively points at the kids, saying they don't count and should just be sent back to their parents. At this, Rie bravely steps in front of Mizudori, but the thug heartlessly shoves him aside, causing Rie to fall. Laughing, the thug mocks Rie, telling him to go back to his mommy. Out of nowhere, Mizudori slaps the thug hard across the face, leaving everyone around them speechless. Furious, the thug growls that she's not going to get away with that. Just in time, Miharu returns and steps in front of Mizudori, and the thug turns to him, demanding who he thinks he is. Miharu, completely taken aback by the chaos, mentally wonders what's going on since he was only gone for a bathroom break. He calmly tells the thug to leave Mizudori alone, but the thug grabs Miharu by the collar. Miharu's toy knife slips from his grip, and the thug, mistaking it for a real weapon, nervously suggests that Miharu might be going a bit overboard. Realizing they have an opportunity, Miharu quickly calls Ryo and Riri, picks them up, and signals for Rie and Mizudori to follow as they make a quick escape. After their little adventure, they find themselves at a jewelry exhibition. Mizudori apologizes to Miharu for the incident, admitting that she got too emotional and even resorted to violence. Miharu reassures her that he's just glad she's safe. Mizudori, a bit embarrassed, admits it must have been hard to watch, to which Miharu laughs, saying he's not exactly one to judge. Determined to lighten the mood, he suggests they enjoy the exhibition. Feeling more relaxed, Miharu removes his cap and glasses, realizing he probably didn't need the disguise after all. Brushing off his earlier concerns, he thinks that even if someone saw them together, it's not like anything serious would happen. Lost in thought, he recalls a fairy tale about a princess who rarely smiled, and his gaze naturally drifts to Mizudori, who is admiring a sunstone. She marvels at its warm color, calling it a little patch of sunlight, and then quietly says that ever since Miharu started visiting, her house feels brighter and filled with light. Miharu is taken aback by her words, watching her as she explains softly that she now believes someday she'll be able to smile. She adds that because of him, she started wishing that for herself. Miharu, flustered, laughs and tells her that's a bit of an exaggeration, but she just looks at him and asks if he really thinks so. Suddenly, a passerby bumps into Mizudori, and Miharu instinctively catches her. She thanks him, saying he saved her once again, and Miharu sighs, asking her to forget the earlier scene. Admitting he must have looked pretty uncool, Mizudori surprises him by saying that she actually thought he looked really cool, just like a real prince. Miharu freezes, stunned by her words, until Mizudori takes his hand. Rie calls her to keep moving, and she responds, leaving Miharu deep in thought, wondering what just happened. As they reach the mall's exit, Miharu suggests calling it a day, and Mizudori thanks him for coming along. She promises the twins she'll make them whatever they want to eat next time, and they excitedly shout their approval. As Mizudori and Rie leave, Riri looks back at Miharu and calls out, saying that Rai-kun's Nini looked just like a princess. Miharu picks Riri up with a grin, remembering Mizudori's earlier compliment where she called him a prince. Later, once the kids are asleep, Miharu is in the shower, unable to shake the memory of her words. He wonders about the expression Mizudori had when she called him a prince. Blushing, he realizes he won't be able to forget that moment anytime soon. The next day, Miharu wakes up feeling groggy and recalls Mizudori's words from before, telling him he looked just like a true prince. But right now, Miharu feels far from princely as he realizes he's got a fever. In class, Kawana is looking around curiously, asking where Aoba is, and Mikage responds that it seems like he has a fever and left early. Back in bed, Miharu is lying there, trying to piece together how he ended up feeling this awful. It probably didn't start this morning, he thinks. Maybe it was from being in the crowd yesterday. That long bath might not have helped either. He figures he still has some time before he needs to pick up Rio and Ruri, so he decides to stay in bed a bit longer. If the fever doesn't break, he thinks he might need to ask the school to keep them a little longer until his mom can get there. At least he can always ask Mikage for the notes from the afternoon classes. He sets an alarm and drifts back into sleep. Meanwhile, Rio, Ruri, and Rie are standing around with Mizudori, who asks the twins if Aoba hasn't come to pick them up yet. Ruri replies that he hasn't, with a tone that seems half worried, half bored. Mizudori decides to call Miharu, but there's no answer, and he isn't replying to her messages either. She finally gets through, though, and introduces herself as Mizudori, Miharu's classmate. She confirms she's talking to his mother. Miharu, on the other hand, is deep in feverish thoughts. He thinks this must be a dream because he's staring at the old apartment ceiling from when he used to live with his mom. It hits him that his fever must have gotten worse after he came home from school, but he didn't want to bother his mom by calling her at work. And yep, he definitely got scolded for it later. When Mizudori arrives with the twins and Rie, they all gather around Miharu, who's looking like he's been through a fever-induced war. Riri innocently asks if Nai is sick, and Mizudori takes charge, saying they should let him rest while the three of them wash up and head to the other room. She asks Rei to wait just a little longer before they leave. While she's thinking about the phone call she had with Miharu's mom earlier, Mizudori remembers the gratitude in the woman's voice. His mom had mentioned how Miharu isn't the type to rely on others, and she was glad that Mizudori offered to help. She even invited Mizudori to come by again and asked if she liked sweets, clearly ready to shower her with appreciation. Mizudori glances at Miharu, who's still asleep. She gently places a hand on his hand, which probably isn't as comforting as it sounds considering the poor guy's fever. In his restless sleep, Miharu feels the coldness and the loneliness creep in, attributing it to his mom being at work, and the fever making him feel more isolated than usual. He reflects on how, lately, he's always had Rio and Ruri around, and it's been a while since he's felt this alone. Suddenly, Miharu hears a faint voice singing. As he forces himself to open his eyes, he sees Mizudori awkwardly trying to sing a lullaby. The scene shifts to a memory of Mizudori as a child, struggling to get her little brother Rie to sleep. She's frustrated, and when her mom asks her what she thinks about while singing, she confesses that she's only thinking about how to make him fall asleep faster. Her mom explains that Rie probably feels lonely, and that's why he can't sleep. She needs to sing gently to reassure him that he isn't alone. Back in the present, Miharu's dazed thoughts are still catching up. Why is she here? And singing a lullaby, of all things? It's not even a particularly good lullaby, more like the type kids sing when they're trying to avoid bedtime themselves. He realizes that the noise from the kids downstairs must be why Mizudori is at his place. Great, he overslept and missed everything. Now he thinks he really needs to thank her, or maybe apologize first. Mizudori leans closer and softly wishes him a quick recovery, with a touch of guilt in her voice. She adds that if she hadn't invited him to come yesterday, he wouldn't have caught a cold. She starts to leave the room, but just then, Miharu struggles to sit up and questions why she'd say something like that. Of course, he promptly falls off the bed in a dramatic but ungraceful display. Mizudori turns back, concerned, asking if she woke him up. He insists he was already half awake. She tells him that she sent him a message earlier and that she got permission from his mom to pick up the twins. Miharu, still a bit dazed, apologizes and thanks her. He adds, in a moment of surprising honesty, that he had a lot of fun yesterday, and so did Rio and Ruri. He admits it was only possible because she invited them. Mizudori is taken aback by his gratitude and places a hand on his forehead, checking his temperature. She responds that she and Rie had fun too, but then quickly shifts back to concerned mode, urging him to get back to bed because he's still not well. Miharu obediently agrees, and she offers to get him something like water or even sing another lullaby. Miharu, trying to be polite, says he's fine and doesn't need anything right now. Just before leaving the room, Mizudori asks, almost hesitantly, if Owa-kun would like to go somewhere together again sometime. With that, she steps out, contemplating how Miharu had mentioned that the house belonged to the twins' dad. He had told her that it still felt too big for him, even after living there for a year. As Mizudori and Rie are about to leave, a voice calls out, asking if she's a friend of Ryo and Ruri, or maybe Miharu's friend. Miharu's stepfather steps forward, introducing himself as the twins and Miharu's dad, leaving the situation dangling on an awkward note.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial.